Everyone feared the millionaire. He barked orders. Staff obeyed. No one dared to challenge him. But then came a waitress, new, quiet, unknown. And in one moment of unexpected courage, she turned his empire of fear into a stage of public humiliation. It was a quiet Friday morning, the kind that crept in with golden sunbeams and the soft clinking of silverware against porcelain. Inside the modest but well-loved restaurant, the staff were finally catching their breath after the early breakfast rush. Laughter hummed faintly from the kitchen. A couple of regulars sipped coffee at the corner booth. Everything felt warm, calm, and safe, until the door creaked open, and the air changed. Every pair of eyes near the entrance froze. A hush swept through the space like a chill, followed by a silent exchange of glances between the staff, tense, stiff, uneasy. The man who had just walked in wore a dark tailored suit and an expression that dripped entitlement. His shoes clicked sharply against the wooden floor, a sound that signaled command more than movement. It was Esteban Rios. The name alone caused shoulders to tighten. He was not just a millionaire, he was a feared presence. A man whose wealth made him believe he owned the world and everyone in it. Especially this place. Every Friday, without fail, he took the same table in the back. He never smiled. Never thanked. Never greeted. He ordered. He demanded. He humiliated. If his toast had too much butter, someone cried. If his coffee was too light, someone got fired. People whispered that he once paid a server 3 months' salary to quit on the spot, just because she dared to forget his sugar packet. And today Esteban had returned. But the usual senior staff were tied up in the kitchen. The only one left to greet him was Natalia, a new waitress who had been working here for less than a month. She had never served Esteban before. In fact, she had only heard rumors about him. But rumors were never enough to prepare someone for reality. Natalia tucked a stray hair behind her ear, steadied her tray, and walked toward him with steady steps. She was young, respectful, but her eyes held a quiet strength. When she arrived at the table, Esteban did not look up. He waved a hand like she was dust in his line of sight. "Coffee," he snapped. "And make sure it does not taste like sock water this time." Natalia blinked. Sock water? She had no idea what he meant, but she smiled calmly and said, "Of course, sir. One coffee coming right up." She turned without hesitation, and her steps did not falter. But at the back of her mind, a small voice stirred. That voice said, "So this is the man everyone fears?" When she returned minutes later with a steaming mug in hand, Esteban lifted it to his lips, sipped, and grimaced. Loudly. Dramatically. He jerked back, nearly knocking over the cup, and slammed it on the table with a violent thud. Coffee splashed across the cloth. Drops hit the floor. One reached the edge of Natalia's apron. "This is garbage," he roared, drawing attention from nearly every table around them. Natalia stared at the mess. Then at the man. Then back at the cup. She did not speak right away. Instead she took a breath. A long one. Measured. When she finally met his eyes, her voice was steady, almost soft. "Are you sure the problem is the coffee, sir?" She tilted her head slightly. "Or perhaps it is you." The restaurant went still. Utterly, terrifyingly still. You could hear the flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. The hum of the refrigerator. Even the shallow breath of a customer near the door. Esteban narrowed his eyes. He was not used to being questioned. Especially not by someone who carried a tray and wore a name tag. "What did you say to me?" he growled. Natalia did not blink. "I asked a question." The boldness in her tone was not arrogant. It was clear. Honest. Grounded. For a long second no one moved. And then Esteban slowly stood. His face flushed. His jaw clenched. His fists trembling. "You do not know who you are talking to," he said, voice trembling with rage. "I could buy this restaurant before lunch. Everyone here knows how I am treated. You," he jabbed a finger toward her, "you should watch yourself." But Natalia? She did not flinch. And what she said next would change everything. Natalia's expression remained unchanged. She looked straight at the man towering over her, still soaked in his ego and entitlement, and replied in a voice that held no fear. "And you should remember, sir, that no one owns respect by force. It is earned." The silence that followed her words was suffocating. No server had ever spoken to Esteban that way. A fork clinked to the floor somewhere across the room. Someone coughed nervously. And somewhere near the kitchen doors an employee muttered a prayer. Esteban's face twisted. Not in confusion. Not in surprise. But in insult. "You are done here," he hissed, pointing to the door. "You will not serve another table while I am breathing. You will never step foot in this place again, do you hear me?" He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone with a flourish, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. He was not just angry. He was vengeful. Natalia stood still. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Her apron was stained, her fingers trembling, but her eyes were sharp, clear. She knew what he was doing. He was texting the owner. The man who, by all accounts, trusted Esteban's opinion more than any employee's. Natalia was sure her job was already gone. Still, she did not step back. And that rattled him. The restaurant held its collective breath. A few customers had already begun recording on their phones, silently lifting them from table edges. No one said a word, but everyone knew something unprecedented was happening. Suddenly, a voice tried to interrupt the scene. "Don Esteban, please." It was one of the older waiters, Mario. A man who had worked there for years and had watched dozens of new hires come and go. He stepped forward with pleading eyes. "She is new. She does not understand. We will handle it, please." Natalia felt her stomach drop. Not because of Esteban's threats, but because of Mario's words. "We will handle it." As if she was a problem. As if her dignity was less important than the wrath of a man with a big bank account. She blinked away the sting in her eyes. Of course. That was how it worked. The system did not protect people like her. It protected power, money, status. And when she thought it could not get more humiliating, Esteban smiled again. A crooked, cruel smile. "You see? Even your own people know how to talk to me." He sat back down slowly, adjusting his cuffs like a king resettling on his throne. Then he leaned back and whispered, "Today you will learn your place." He hit the call button. The restaurant manager was not in today. But he did not need to know that. Because he had always gotten what he wanted, with money, with threats, and with fear. Natalia took a step back, clenching her fists. She had not spoken out to win. She had spoken out because she could no longer stand by. But now, she was alone. Until a soft hand touched her arm. Natalia turned. It was a woman from the corner table, perhaps in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair, elegant but humble in her posture. She had been watching from the beginning. And now, quietly, she walked up beside Natalia and said, loud enough for Esteban to hear, "Do not let him silence you." The woman looked Natalia in the eye. "He has made people small for years. It is time someone reminded him that even mountains fall when the earth below them shakes." Natalia exhaled slowly. She nodded. Gratitude surged through her chest. For the first time since this began, she was not alone. Esteban scoffed. "Oh please. Now we are giving pep talks to servers." He raised his voice, barking toward the counter. "Someone get this girl out of my sight. Or I will do it myself." People began whispering. A man near the window stood slightly from his seat. A couple on the other side exchanged wide-eyed glances. Phones were raised more openly now. But just as it seemed the situation might explode, a voice cut through the chaos. A voice neither loud nor rushed, but deep, calm, and commanding. "What is going on here?" Every head turned toward the entrance. The man who spoke was older. He wore a light gray suit and leaned on a polished wooden cane. His presence was quiet but powerful, like thunder before a storm. Esteban's expression faltered. His phone dropped slightly. Natalia did not recognize the man. But Mario and the rest of the senior staff straightened instantly. Whispers rippled. Don Rogelio. The owner. The true owner. And Esteban's former mentor. The room fell into complete silence. Esteban tried to recover his tone, standing and spreading his hands in mock confusion. "Ah, Rogelio, perfect timing. This new hire, this waitress, has been wildly disrespectful. You would not believe what she just said to me." Don Rogelio did not even look at him. He turned to Natalia. "Are you the new waitress?" She nodded, unsure what to say. "Yes, sir." He gave a slow, respectful nod. Then said 7 words that silenced Esteban more than anything else could have. "Thank you for your courage. Continue your work." Natalia's breath caught. The room erupted in unspoken relief. But Esteban? His face went pale. Then red. Then pale again. Esteban's fists clenched around his phone. He was still standing, but his presence, the dominance he once carried, was visibly cracking. "You cannot be serious," he said through gritted teeth. "You are backing her? Over me?" Don Rogelio finally looked at him. Not with anger. With disappointment. "I am not backing anyone, Esteban," he said. "I am acknowledging integrity where I see it. Something you used to understand." The words landed like stones. Esteban took a step forward. "You are really going to humiliate me in front of everyone? After everything I have done for this place?" His voice cracked. somewhere between rage and disbelief. I have brought clients. I have written checks. I made this restaurant known. Don Rogelio remained unmoved. He took a step closer, resting both hands gently atop his cane. You think money is what makes a place worth remembering? He asked. You think shouting and belittling staff earns you loyalty? Esteban's jaw tightened. I have invested. And you have forgotten what respect means? Rogelio cut him off. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of years. Natalia watched, heart pounding, unsure if she should sit, run, or cry. Rogelio turned slightly toward her. She stood with dignity, he said to the room. She did not scream. She did not retaliate. But she spoke the truth. And for that, I will not allow her to be punished. Esteban's eyes darted around the restaurant. He was looking for support. From Mario. From the staff. From the customers he thought were loyal. But no one met his gaze. They were all watching him now, not with fear but with awareness. They saw him differently. He had spent years hiding behind wealth, mistaking obedience for admiration. But in this moment he was simply a man exposed. A man stripped of the illusion he had built. Esteban took a deep breath. He laughed bitterly. This is betrayal, he said, raising his voice again. You forget who I am. But this time his voice did not echo. Rogelio stepped forward once more. If you walk out that door today, Esteban, you will not walk back into any business with my name on it. He said it with finality. And silence fell again. Esteban's face turned from red to white. His shoulders, once high with pride, sagged slightly. You are making a mistake, he whispered. No, Rogelio said. I made a mistake years ago, when I allowed you to think that your money gave you permission to treat others as less. Esteban looked around, his eyes landing on Natalia for a fleeting second. But there was no apology there. No shame. Only disbelief. He turned sharply and began to walk away, his steps fast, angry. A chair toppled behind him. Someone near the counter flinched. He pushed the door open without looking back, his suit flapping behind him like the end of a rain. Natalia stood frozen. Was it really over? A few people clapped, softly, uncertainly. The kind of applause that said more than words could. The old woman who had stood beside her nodded with quiet pride. Mario, still stunned, looked to Rogelio with wide eyes. Rogelio sighed. Then walked toward Natalia. You were not wrong to speak, he said. But it takes more than truth to change a place. It takes someone willing to risk something to protect it. Natalia nodded slowly. I thought I was going to lose my job. Rogelio smiled faintly. You just saved it. And not just yours. He turned to the staff gathered at the counter and spoke loudly. No one will ever raise their voice at any of you again without reason. Not while I own this place. The words were not poetic. They were not fiery. But they were enough. Natalia finally allowed her shoulders to relax. The tension drained from her limbs. Her knees wobbled slightly from holding back too much emotion. I thank you, she said softly. Rogelio waved it off. Do not thank me. You reminded me what leadership is supposed to look like. Natalia stood there, stained apron, flushed cheeks, heart thudding in her ears, and yet, somehow, she felt taller than ever before. By the time Natalia stepped outside after her shift that night, the sun was already retreating behind the rooftops. The breeze felt different, lighter. She exhaled slowly and looked down at her coffee-stained apron. It was no longer a mark of humiliation. It was a badge. Of standing tall when it mattered. Of being seen, finally, not as a servant, but as someone who spoke when others remained silent. She walked home alone, but she did not feel alone. That feeling would only grow stronger in the days to come. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The restaurant's phone began ringing before the doors were even unlocked. Customers, new ones, old ones, ones who had not visited in months, were calling to ask, is that waitress working today? Was that video real? I just want to shake her hand. By mid-afternoon, the online world had caught on. One of the diners had posted a video, unedited, raw, but powerful. It showed Natalia standing her ground. Esteban barking threats. And then, the quiet voice of Don Rogelio bringing justice to a room that had never dared dream of it. The clip went viral. Thousands of views became hundreds of thousands. By nightfall, national pages had shared it. Waitress destroys entitled millionaire, read one caption. She stood up and the whole room stood still, read another. Natalia's name trended for the first time in her life. And suddenly, a simple worker with a borrowed uniform became a symbol. Of courage. Of self-respect. Of every worker who had been looked down upon for simply doing their job. Inside the restaurant, change was happening fast. Natalia walked into her next shift to find flowers on the hostess stand. A handwritten note rested among them. For the one who reminded us what dignity looks like, a grateful customer. Another bouquet arrived later that day. And then another. One elderly man left a small envelope with cash inside and a message. For your future, not as a tip. Natalia blinked through tears more than once that week. But she never allowed the attention to change her rhythm. She still cleaned her own tables. She still folded napkins when no one asked. But now when customers looked at her, they smiled. And more importantly, they listened. Even the staff changed. Mario, once passive in fear, began to speak up when orders were wrong. Two of the youngest waiters started shadowing Natalia during rush hour, hoping to learn not just her timing but her presence. The culture was shifting. And she was at the center of it. Meanwhile, Esteban was discovering a very different version of visibility. His name, once whispered with admiration, now carried a different weight. His offices received calls, lots of them. From clients demanding explanations. From partners distancing themselves. From news agencies requesting interviews, none of which he granted. He had underestimated the world's appetite for truth. He had built his image on money and command. But now, the man who once demanded silence was haunted by the sound of his own exposed ego echoing online. He tried to recover, scheduled meetings, wrote apology drafts, reached out to people who had once owed him favors. But doors closed faster than he could knock. His arrogance had become a liability. And the city had moved on. Back at the restaurant, Don Rogelio called Natalia into his office a few days later. The walls were lined with old newspaper clippings and black and white photos of the place when it first opened. He pointed to one. That was my first hire, he said, smiling. The day I stopped trying to run a business and started trying to build a home. He turned to her. You reminded me of that. Natalia sat quietly, unsure of what to say. I want you to take on something more, Rogelio continued. She blinked. More? He nodded. We need someone to train the new staff. To help create a code, not of rules but of values. You know them better than anyone. Natalia's throat tightened. I do not know if I am ready. You already proved you are, he said. You are not being offered this because you stood up to a millionaire. You are being offered this because you showed us what it means to stand. She smiled slowly. Not because she had planned this. Not because she had ever wanted attention. But because now she understood something important. She had not changed to earn respect. She had simply refused to lose it. Natalia stood by the mirror in the tiny staff locker room, pinning her name tag to a crisp, clean shirt. But this time the name tag read something different. Natalia Ruiz, Service Coordinator. The letters were not bold. Not gold. Not flashy. But they meant more than any title she had ever imagined. It did not mean power. It meant responsibility. It meant that every new employee who walked through that kitchen door would have someone on their side, someone who understood what it felt like to be dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. And it all started with a cup of coffee. She stepped out of the locker room and into the dining hall, where the lunch shift was just beginning. The usual chatter filled the air. Plates clinked, silverware scraped across porcelain, and the espresso machine hissed to life. But there was something new. Something invisible but deeply felt. Respect. Not the kind people offered out of fear, but the kind that was freely given. Customers who once barely looked at the waiters now greeted them. Staff who used to work with their heads down now held their shoulders higher. Natalia paused for a moment and scanned the room. There was Mario training a new hire at table 4. There was Luis, the dishwasher, laughing as he leaned through the kitchen pass to tell a joke. And at table 7, a seat once occupied by Esteban every Friday afternoon, sat a mother and her young daughter, sharing a plate of spaghetti and smiling. No tension. No fear. Just life. Simple, honest, respectful life. And that was worth everything. Later that afternoon, as she was reviewing the new onboarding binder Rogelio had asked her to help create, a young woman walked in, visibly nervous. She clutched a small envelope in her hands. Hi, she said softly. I am here to apply for the waitress position. Natalia looked up and smiled warmly. You found the right place. The girl handed her the envelope. I saw the video. The one with the man and you. I watched it like 10 times. Natalia raised an eyebrow gently. Oh. I have worked in 3 restaurants, the girl continued, voice trembling slightly. And I was treated like a ghost in all of them. But when I saw what you did, I thought maybe this place is different. Natalia stood, walked around the counter and took the envelope with care. It is different, she said. But not because of me. She nodded toward the back of the restaurant where Rogelio's office door sat ajar. It is different because someone chose to listen when it mattered. And now we all make sure it stays that way. The girl exhaled. Her shoulders dropped in relief. Natalia placed a gentle hand on her back and led her toward the training board. Come, she said. Let me show you how we work. Around here, everyone's voice matters. And just like that, another story began. Meanwhile, the city had not forgotten. Natalia became a quiet figure in local headlines. Not because she chased them, but because people chased stories like hers. A small magazine, but Natalia never spoke as a hero. She spoke as someone who knew what it felt like to be silenced and chose not to be. The world listened. Because her story was not unique. It was just finally told. As for Esteban, his downfall came not from one video or one public confrontation. It came from years of unchecked arrogance finally meeting a wall it could not climb. Accountability. He disappeared from public life for months. Rumors swirled. Some said he tried to relocate his business. Others claimed he attempted rebranding. But none of that mattered anymore. He had lost something far more valuable than image. He had lost credibility. And he could not buy it back. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. And yet, every Friday afternoon at precisely 1 p.m., Natalia would glance at table 7. Not in fear. Not in dread. But as a silent reminder of the day fear was replaced by truth. The day a man used to being obeyed was finally told, enough. The day a restaurant, once shadowed by ego, stepped into the light. And though the table was often empty, sometimes it held families. Or friends. Or strangers who shared dessert and laughter. And that was enough. One evening, as the restaurant prepared to close, Don Rogelio approached Natalia quietly. Do you regret speaking up? He asked gently. Natalia thought for a moment. No, she said. Even if no one had backed me, I still would have spoken. He nodded. That is what leadership looks like. He paused. And someday when I step away, I want you to remember this place was changed not by my rules but by your example. Natalia smiled. Not with pride, but with peace. Because now she understood something deeper than courage. She had not just stood up for herself. She had built a path for others to walk beside her.